Okay, Mark Franz, Foundation Fitness. We're gonna do a quick video on why I don't like to cut carbs in a diet phase immediately. So there's a couple prerequisites here. This is assuming that the person has optimal hormonal profiles, is not severely overweight, and can process glucose effectively. So again, if someone is really overweight, this does not apply to them. And I don't just do this with every client. I have clients on keto, for Christ's sake. It's person dependent. But with a normal average person, male or female, we'll say age range, whatever, 18 to 35 or 40, maybe even 45. I don't like to pull carbs as a first line of dieting. So the reason being is that most people who are healthy and not obese should be able to handle carbs to a certain extent. Everyone's tolerance is a lot different. But if someone can train really, really hard, their tolerance is gonna be much higher than someone who trains kind of half-ass and just kind of messes around. Someone who has a very high output of energy throughout the day, whether that be a construction worker or even me, like I don't consider myself like I have a hard job or anything, but I'm on my feet all day and I train really, really hard. So my carb tolerance is quite a bit higher as well. So we can go over what the benefits of keeping carbs in are. So if we're looking from just a physiological standpoint, carbohydrates, starchy carbohydrates will stimulate T3 output. They'll stimulate, I believe, the conversion of T4 to T3, or they'll stimulate your thyroid to push TSH. One of those mechanisms occurs and your metabolism will run hotter. That's why when you do refeeds in a diet phase, you want to keep them pretty much carb-centric in order to push that mechanism. And again, one meal, people think it does it. It doesn't really do a lot in one meal, but if you have a whole day of consistent carbohydrate feeding, you will oftentimes see somebody's metabolism kick up pace a little bit, right? They also increase performance. So obviously the more glycogen you have, the more endurance you have in the gym, and the more mentally people feel, if they're full of glycogen, the more mentally people feel they can exert a high amount of energy and produce strength. So the other side of that too is sleep. So the other side of this is sleep being, I don't know, if you've ever dieted really, really, really hard, you'll realize you can't sleep for a good portion of the diet. And typically that's because you're going to bed hungry. Your body is basically in an instinctual phase saying, get up and eat, I'm starving. And cortisol will spike, telling you to get up and go find food. And so you'll wake up every hour or two just hungry and dying, right? So again, we can put those carbohydrates in the last meal pre-bed in order to spike serotonin and increase sleep. So all of these things together, plus they taste good, plus everyone likes carbs, right? So I mean, that's not really an important one, but it is actually important for mental reasons, right? So all these things put together make me prefer to keep carbohydrates as high as possible in a client's diet all the way through a diet phase. Now, we only have so much we can pull from a diet. We have protein, carbs, and fats. Now, we're not going to pull protein in when we initiate a diet. If anything, protein is typically going to go up a little bit. So say you're at a gram of protein per pound of body weight. Sometimes, again, not all the time, these are generalities, you can go ahead and immediately push someone to 1.5 grams of protein as you pull back on something else, which will keep calories roughly the same, but allow more of a thermogenic effect, allowing fat loss to occur at the same caloric intake. So what are we going to pull then? We're going to pull dietary fats. So then you just got to think, like, why do we have dietary fats in our diet? What do we need them for? We need them for healthy hormonal profiles, especially if you're natural, but females, even if you're not, especially females too, you need to have a certain amount of fat in your diet to create an optimal healthy hormonal profile. So how much is that? Again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but from what I've seen and what I've seen works the best, I like to stick between the very low end, not saying the very end of like a prep diet, but in just a regular diet phase, I like to stick between 25 as the lowest, but typically 30 to 40, 45 near the high end of dietary fat, grams per day. So 30 to 45 grams per day is generally going to give you the results you want as far as everything functioning optimally in your body. Again, this is important for men too because it helps your testosterone production. How much it does, I don't actually know. I take testosterone, so I haven't really looked that up, to be honest. But that's why we have dietary fats. So if you have excess dietary fats in your diet, they're not metabolically active as like carbohydrates. They're not going to do the same thing for you performance-wise or for your metabolism or any of that as the carbohydrates will. So the first thing I would do personally is pull dietary fats down a little bit. you can pull them all the way to the levels where you feel like it's how deep of a deficit do you want to create is the question. But you can pull them all the way down to where you think you'll have optimum hormonal profiles. Once you're there, you should, by just pulling dietary fat out, even if you bump protein up, probably get a good little jump on fat loss. After you've been going for a while, you're obviously going to need to pull carbohydrates down, right? So then what do? Typically, if you have carbohydrates on both ends of training, here's carbohydrates, and then maybe one after, maybe you pull that one after first, right? There's honestly dozens of different ways to do this. My personal preference is to keep them around training as much as possible. On non-training days, when I pull people's calories really low, I'll typically backload carbohydrates in the evening, so someone may have a big bolus amount right before bed to, again, spike serotonin and help sleep and recovery, which, again, in my opinion, is paramount for fat loss, damn near more than anything. So if you can keep carbohydrates in my opinion, you're going to have a better look, you're going to perform better, and you're going to sleep better in general. It sounds like a win all around for me. And me personally, in my last show, I got pretty fucking lean, and in the off season, I built my carbohydrates up to 1,000 grams a day. And for most of my diet, I stayed above 500. And the last, I don't know, 6 weeks maybe we came below that. And then the last 3 weeks, it was just brutal, awful. But that was only 3 weeks. Not including the days that I had, I'd go 40 hours twice a week without any carbohydrates on non-training days and around that. But yeah, I was able to handle a lot. So I'm rambling now, but that's the whole point. That's why I like to keep carbohydrates high. And basically, when you're dieting, if you're dieting down hard and you want to have the best physique possible, you need to fuel performance. That should be your number one goal. Fuel your performance, fuel your anabolic windows around training, and the other times of the day are going to be used for fat loss, not your times while you're training. That's to hold or maintain or grow muscle tissue. The other 20 hours of the day, that's for fat loss, and that's when you try to manipulate things to that extent. Thanks.